Jump! Shakaraka! As soon as he stepped into the elevator, Wei Wei heard the faintly explosive music in his ears, and forced his way into his eardrums like a fly. Judging from the volume, it seems that the distance is not far. He glanced slightly sideways to distinguish, and glanced at the buttons on the 1st to 9th floors in the old ladder, pursed his lips, and chose the 3rd floor. The elevator door slowly closed, a slight dizziness appeared, and the red numbers began to change. From 1 to 2, to 3 again. The moment the elevator door opened, the looming sound of explosive music suddenly disappeared. Outside the elevator, there was an empty darkness. There was a faint cool breeze blowing in, as if someone was blowing a faint cold air on the back of his neck. Through the faint light from the elevator, it can be found that outside the elevator is a blank space that has not been decorated. There is no one person. There are only rough cement pillars and floors covered with dust, and broken plastic bags are gently rolling. Like a weightless human head. I got it wrong. Wei Wei pressed the close button and returned to the 1st floor again. He left the elevator, walked outside the building slowly, and looked at the building again. This is an unfinished building built on the outskirts of the city and looks a bit lonely. There are 10 floors in total. From the bottom, it looks like a black hole. The floors are empty. The glass is not installed. The black space looks like a greedy mouth. Looking in from the outside, there is absolutely no trace of anyone in this building. It doesn't even look like there is electricity here. But in fact, there is not only electricity, but even an elevator, so there must be problems. Wei Wei frowned, returned to the elevator again, and decided to use a more direct method. He pressed all the elevator buttons from the 1st to the 9th floor, then took out his pistol and pointed it at the elevator dashboard. The pupils became slightly reddish, as if blood shots were swimming, and threatened in a low voice, "Go up." The elevator trembled slightly, as if trembling with fear, and then the instrument changed and rose rapidly. When I reached the 3rd floor again, I suddenly felt a strange sense of weightlessness hit my mind, and the elevator seemed to be falling rapidly. Wei Wei nodded lightly, put away the gun, and turned to look at the elevator. There are only 2 possibilities for this special sense of weightlessness. First, the elevator had an accident. Second, the folded space on this floor was found. Bounce! Shakaraka! When the elevator door opened, intense and shocking music, mixed with the smell of alcohol and dazzling lanterns, rushed toward the face. Wei Wei narrowed his eyes slightly and looked up at the chaotic space in front of him. The multicolored lights spun out beams of light of different lengths like crazy, as if to cut the world into pieces. Although it is a bit earthy, the adrenaline-surging music has set off waves that hit the ceiling again and again. The idiot who was dressed in fashion and was too cool, shook his head frantically on a crowded dance floor. From a distance, it looks like a swarm of earthworms swaying. Wei Wei looked at this chaotic world with a look of disgust on his face. He took a deep look at the elevator and warned it to be honest. Then he took a deep breath, suppressed the surging desire in his heart, and walked out at the elevator entrance where no one was paying attention. Into this strange world. On both sides, countless people are swaying their lives. Someone put the belly of whiskey into his mouth and swallowed wildly, swallowing this strong liquor like drinking water. His face even turned purple, showing symptoms of severe alcoholism, but he still grabbed another bottle without hesitation. Some people wear white hospital gowns, their faces are pale and yellow, and their lips are purple. When he was dying, he was lying on a movable stretcher, relying on infusions to maintain his lowest life, but he still had the nurse stuff a plastic tube in his mouth, and his thin chest kept heaving and exhausting. With the only strength left in his body, he sucked in the hookah. Someone was making a bet, and the sharp dagger was quickly stabbing between the unfolded fingers. With a cheese sound, there was a mistake. The sharp alloy blade cut off most of his fingers, leaving only a layer of flesh attached. Excited, he tore off the half of his fingers and gestured to the person next to him. A group of people around cheered loudly, saying that they would cut another one to add to the fun. Wei Wei found an unoccupied corner in the noise, and found that there was no money for drinks, so he took a bottle of beer and drank it. Immediately, many people around him cast contemptuous glances at him. Wei Wei knows that this group of people has a unique chain of contempt. The more they waste their lives, the easier they will be sought after. I didn't want to compare with them, so I enjoyed the free beer with peace of mind. Jump! Shakaraka! The atmosphere in the bar is getting warmer and louder, the volume of the music is pushed higher and higher, and the cycle is monotonous and restless. The men and women in every corner are also getting more and more crazy, and their colorful hair is tossing to and fro. As the clock pointed to 1 o'clock in the morning, and as a large mass of dry ice suddenly rose on the stage, the atmosphere reached its extreme. Everyone was screaming in the chaotic music, holding their hands high, as if they were expecting something. Wei Wei also sat up straight, his fingers flicking on the table unintentionally. On the left side of the dance floor, next to a heavy iron gate, an electronic red light suddenly flashed, and after a while, it bounced open gently. In the bar, everyone suddenly became quite quiet, and it seemed that even the most explosive music was a few decibels lower. Dozens of crazy men and women crossed their hands on their chests. Under the crazy appearance, they seemed to be a little excited and pious. A man dressed in diamonds, his jacket covered with sharp rivets, with purple eyeshadow and dark red lips walked out. He shaved half of his hair bald, and the other half was very long, fixed with hairspray. Pointing at half the sky like a thorn. With an indifferent and proud expression, he stood in the middle of the dance floor, waving his hands high to the rhythm of the music. The crowd below became even more excited, jumping vigorously and waving their hands, as if the floor was shaking. The Gothic DJ was very satisfied with the atmosphere, he waved his hand, and behind the iron gate, there were two shirtless, muscular men with black masks on their faces, and lifted a black thing up. On the stage on the dance floor. Unexpectedly, it was a black statue about 1 meter tall. The main body of the statue is the image of a goddess with a beautiful and gentle face. She has compassion on her face and lowered eyes, giving people a sense of holiness. Wearing a loose sackcloth robe, gently lifted between the crotch. He stepped on the lifelike clouds with his bare feet, like a virgin standing in the sky, looking down at the world mercifully. Love lives. Enjoy life. When the crowd saw the statue, their expressions became even more excited, and their Adam's apple rolled frantically. But they all agreed, holding back the shouting in their throats. The music was slowly fading like a tide, and the whole bar suddenly became quiet, only the multicolored lights were still spinning and intertwining, wanton cutting the world. A neat and low voice resounded in the throats of everyone in the bar, like a collective raving. The Gothic DJ had a mysterious smile on his face, crossed his legs and bowed, with his right hand on his chest. The movements are elegant and mysterious. Under the stage, countless people showed pious expressions on their faces, and followed him to salute the statue of the goddess. It's more like a church if you ignore the flickering lights around you and the music that's pulled down but still muffled. The goddess's brows and eyes seemed more gentle. Even the corner of the stone sculpture's mouth seemed to have a smile on it. In the psychedelic lights, there is something mysterious, lightly sprinkled on the devout people. So, the face of the person who drank wildly changed from the dead man's face to a healthy rosy quickly. The person who was smoking the hookah became more energetic and sat up from the stretcher. The man who had cut off a finger looked at his severed finger in surprise, where the granulation was wriggling and new fingers were growing. They are excited, satisfied, and crazy. When this magical scene appeared, Wei Wei, who was sitting in the corner, gradually became indifferent. He was not surprised or excited because he saw the fullness of life, and he ignored these believers who were ecstatic because of the exuberant life energy. In his eyes, he saw only blossoms. Rotten flowers are blooming contrary to common sense. Just like a puppet, it has been tied on a string, but it thinks it is alive and is ecstatic. After sighing slightly, Wei Wei silently took out the tablet and recorded. The first type of danger was found. Nature, Demon of Life Grade, D Grade 1 high-level demon infection was found, 4 intermediate-level infections, and low-level infections. Wei Wei was silent, glanced at the crazy crowd, and continued to record, all of them. Solution plan. Looking at the basic items that need to be filled in the last electronic report, Wei Wei thought for a while and carefully entered, strictly abide by the Foundation's training regulations, and provide friendly persuasion and guidance to good people who have gone astray. Putting away the tablet, a satisfied smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Then, he took out 2 guns from the gun pocket behind him, checked them carefully, and then started to check the bullets. Huang Qinchin's little thing exudes a lovely halo. The red warhead as thick as a thumb gives people a strong sense of security. With a gentle smile, Wei Wei carefully checked the bullet, then reloaded the magazine and loaded it. He got up calmly. In the smell of alcohol, perfume, and some kind of rotting seafood, he pushed his body through the frenzied crowd around him. He checked whether there was a back door on this floor, and then used the chain was carefully locked. Back in the hall, he punched the light switch next to him and clenched the gun tightly. I like persuading people to be kind and so on. Bang! Shakaraka! The pale lights came on, illuminating the bar in a bright light, interrupting the madness climbing in the dark. The oscillating music was still ringing in the ears, but the sudden light still made everyone feel strongly uncomfortable. I don't know how many heads were swaying in the bar. After getting used to the strong lights around, they turned around and looked around, and their eyes fell on Wei Wei, whose palms were slowly withdrawing from the direction of the electric switch. In their field of vision, a new face appeared. She doesn't look very old, only 18 or 19 years old, but she has a calm and sophisticated temperament. He quickly took out a document that could not be seen clearly, shook it to the crowd at will, and then put it away at a faster speed. Everyone, I'm sorry to bother you. Wei Wei squeezed a professional smile on his face and spoke politely, I'm from the Paranormal Research and Investigation Department. You worship the power of demons and cause the spread of demonic factors, which is the first type of dangerous behavior strictly prohibited by the Executive Office. So, please stand in line and go back with me to be investigated, okay? Investigation section. Before Wei Wei could finish speaking, the people present were shocked. Then I don't know how many people looked slightly frightened, and looked at the gothic man on the stage subconsciously. Some people wonder, didn't Mr. DJ have it all done? Some people also wondered, what does the investigation department do? In the eyes of all kinds of doubts, the gothic man also reacted abruptly. First, he quickly glanced at the elevator entrance and found no other suspicious figures. Then he quickly scanned the monitor screen, and there was no outside the building. Other movement. Although he didn't understand how he got in, he quickly regained his composure, with a smile on his face, and said, "Is there any misunderstanding?" He spoke politely and in a gentle tone. But soon, the people in front of the dance floor reacted and squeezed in slightly, blocking the statue of life behind him, and the DJ's voice continued to sound softly, "We worship one of the 12 main gods who control the power of life. Goddess of life. Born from the boundless spiritual ocean, she brings life and health to this world, and also brings us spiritual comfort. It is he who helps us heal our diseases and heal our wounds, and it is he who guides us, the lost lambs, to." In Mr. DJ's soft tone, many people around, their eyes gradually became lost, and a sense of piety emerged spontaneously. The little panic that was interrupted by outsiders at the beginning was gradually subsided, and the sense of shame that some uncomfortable behavior was discovered by others, also fading fast. Wei Wei had a serious listening expression on his face, and then his right hand was raised impatiently. He held a gun in his hand. The gun is an old-fashioned pistol with a very long barrel, and even a little rust, with a rough temperament, like a tough guy with a temper. Then Wei Wei directly hooked the wrench. Bah! A flame erupted from the muzzle. Crash! A man who stood beside the dance floor and blocked the statue of the goddess of life suddenly froze on the spot. He looked down in disbelief, and saw that his abdomen had been shot out. A big hole. Through this hole, you can see the statue behind. The bullet passed through his abdomen and hit the bottom of the statue, and the stone flakes splattered all over. The idol lost its support and slowly fell down, smashed into pieces, and a figure slowly slipped out of it. It was a vaguely recognizable girl who looked like she was still in school. She had a ponytail and was even wearing school uniform pants. But her body, the parts that you can see, are as thin as wood, like a crumpled black rag. The sudden sound of gunfire woke up everyone who was slightly addicted, and even DJ's words were abruptly stopped. Countless expressions changed drastically and looked at Wei Wei blankly. The devil of life will not give life. Wei Wei smiled and explained patiently to them, the demon of life only has the ability to deprive and give life energy, and can transfer the life energy of one unit to another unit. It can transform a person's life activity into pure life energy is extracted and deprived, and given to others. Therefore, your so-called prayers are just using demons to take other people's lives. After a pause, the corners of his mouth pursed slightly. You guys are even used to wasting these stolen lives. You. The gothic Mr. DJ doesn't seem to be in the mood to listen to Wei Wei's pedigree. He was just chatting with Wei Wei in a low voice and with a friendly attitude. He was shocked by this sudden shot, especially when he saw Wei Wei actually he hurt people mercilessly, and even after smashing the idol he worshipped, his eyes instantly turned blood red, and the blue veins on his neck burst out like earthworms. The blasphemer, you are the blasphemer! He suddenly gritted his teeth and shouted, kill him, capture him, and dedicate it to the goddess. Whoa! The shot just now caused most of the people present to fall into shock. The DJ's roar made them react, and they saw the statue of the that fell to pieces on the ground, and the little girl exposed under the statue, panic when the evidence of the crime was discovered. Spread again. First, a few people in black robes who were originally standing behind the DJ reacted the fastest and walked up through the crowd. Then, the eyes of the believers gradually showed a fierce light, and they stared at Wei Wei who was alone in the crowd. Some sturdy young people had already picked up the wine bottles on the table next to them. Cylinders, and some weird stick-like rubber stuff. How can people who are not afraid of sharp daggers and spirits be afraid of bullets? The exuberant vitality always makes them feel the urge to destroy from time to time. The madness seems to be spreading and rapidly fermenting. Pairs of eyes became scarlet, and strange expressions bloomed on each face, approaching faintly in the flickering light. Hey! At this moment, Wei Wei, who was surrounded by the middle, slowly lowered his head and seemed a little regretful. I originally wanted to persuade you to stay away from the devil. Then, he suddenly raised his head, his face suddenly lost all smiles. Now we can only implement Plan B. The next moment, he suddenly faced the crowd and kept pulling the trigger. Blah blah blah. Holes appeared one by one in the men in black robes who rushed through the crowd, bursting out with coquettish and bright blood flowers. A terrified cry rang out. The tattered body and the broken limbs of the sky were splashed 2 or 3 meters away, crushing the tables full of drinks. Even if you worship the life demon and possess strong life force, you can still be killed. They can quickly recover all kinds of self-mutilation and self-injury wounds, and even the weakening of vitality caused by aging, but as long as the trauma caused in an instant, the force of death caused by them exceeds the energy limit contained in their current life, they will die immediately. It's a pity that some people in these bars don't even know about this. The various miraculous experiences they experienced after joining this party gave them a fanatical confidence, until such a deafening gunshot suddenly sounded in their ears, and they saw that a familiar person lost their familiar face and head. Wei Wei's body moved flexibly in the chaotic crowd and space. His movements were not outrageously fast, but very precise. He smashed the guys in black robes with the gun, and stuffed the empty guns back into the gun pockets. He didn't care about changing the bullets. Dangerous, he picked up stools, wine bottles, fruit picks, and a stick-shaped rubber item that he grabbed at random, and attacked those who attacked him or didn't have time to avoid him. Panic spread, and more people fled with their heads up than the desperate crowd squeezed in. The dazzling blood red came into view, causing the twisted faces to climb into fear. And when they found that the elevator was out of control and the back door was locked by heavy chains, panic surged in their hearts, and the tide seemed to fold back into the bar. Looking at the man walking among the blood, there was a feeling of indifference. A sense of desperation that is elusive. In the chaos, someone was squeezed onto the console, and the explosive music filled the eardrums again. Bounce! Shakaraka! Wei Wei held a gun and approached the dance floor. Under his feet was already a carpet of blood rivers. Damn! The gothic DJ looked at the person who killed and opened the ring below and quickly approached him, and clenched his teeth inlaid with stainless steel. He roared and rushed forward, like a human flesh tank, knocking the 4 or 5 people who were blocking him into the air. His eyes were blood red as if blood had burst, and he slammed towards Wei Wei who was approaching the stage. Fist with skull ring. Before the sharp edge of the ring swiped on Wei Wei's face, Wei Wei suddenly turned around and pulled out the second gun in his pouch. It's a little longer than the first gun, it's silver, and it has fine patterns and a set of black English signatures on it. Elegant and refined, like a lady. The long spear spun in the palm of his hand, and elegantly and precisely drew a spear flower, which hit the DJ's face. DJ was slightly sluggish. Bah! The next moment, special bullets roared out of the black barrel, and half of DJ's head exploded into blood. But he trembled a few times on the ground, and suddenly got up again. From the half-shattered eyes, a blood-colored light like hatred shot out. With a posture that didn't resemble a humanoid, with a heavy sense of strength, his body grabbed Wei Wei's neck again. Wei Wei leaned slightly. His movements were not as fast as the opponent, but he was extremely precise. He opened the distance between the opponent's palm and his neck, pointed the black spear diagonally, and fired again. Bah! A big hole was blown open in DJ's chest, and he flew out again obliquely. But when he reached it, he climbed up again, his spine was broken, his body touched the ground at both ends, and the place where the flesh and blood was connected in the middle was in the arch bridge posture. Wei rushed in the direction. Wei Wei kicked him down with one foot, stepped on the spot where his spine was broken, and aimed at his upper body and continuously pulled the trigger. Blah blah blah. He emptied the bullets in one breath. DJ's upper body was already mashed, but the flesh was still wriggling. Wei Wei shook his head in dissatisfaction. Reading www.yuyuganshu.com picked up another bottle of high spirits from the side, poured it on him, and set it on fire. The flames poof rose, the twisted flesh twitched in the flames, and then completely stopped. Wei Wei breathed a sigh of relief with satisfaction, and the smile returned to his face. Jump! Shakaraka! The music continued, but the smell of alcohol, smoke, perfume, and rotting seafood was filled with the smell of fresh blood. It was like an invisible big hand that deterred the survivors' stomachs and filled them into a food called fear. The frantic expressions disappeared from their faces, and panic crept up on their faces. Mr. DJ died. He was omnipotent in the hearts of many people, and he died under such a simple method. Some people suddenly had uncontrollable convulsions and vomited. Some people's legs became weak and they fell to their knees on the ground. And among a group of terrified demon-infected, Wei Wei had turned around leisurely in front of the flames, picked up a good cigarette scattered from the table next to it, put it in his mouth, and lit it with the hot muzzle. Then put away the elegant lady, took out the rough and strong man again, glanced at the remaining people, then grabbed a handful of bullets and slowly stuffed them into the magazine. The man who collapsed in the pool of blood shivered, looked at Wei Wei in fear, and pleaded with a trembling voice, "Forgive! Forgive us!" Wei Wei snapped the of his gun, turned to look at him, then shook his head with a smile, "Don't want. Ba ba boom blah blah." Persuading people to be kind or something, I like it the most. Hey! Walking out of this abandoned old building, Wei Wei took a deep breath under the stars above his head. The slightly cold but fresh air in late autumn poured into the lungs, diluting the dizziness caused by the disturbing music and the turbid air just now. Using the light, he walked down the cracked path and came to his car. It's a black Jeep with a solid frame and tall tires, worn in places. Even in the left door, there are several bullet holes. Wei Wei took off the clothes that were covered in blood, and could even be squeezed with blood, and set it on fire. Then he wiped off all the blood on his hands and face with a wet towel, and then took out a set of clothes of the same style from the trunk, one by one, and put them on himself. Taking advantage of the starlight, he took a look at the car window, and simply arranged his hairstyle. Looking at himself in the dry and sunny reflection in the glass, the expression on his face seemed indescribably low. Shas hasha. Behind him, the sound of scales rubbing against the gravel suddenly sounded, rustling, making people's hair stand up. However, there is no shadow around, it seems to be just a human auditory hallucination. When Wei Wei heard this voice, a smile appeared on his face, he stretched out his hand to snap the rear-view mirror of the car, and aimed it behind him. Through the mirror, he saw a swarthy python with a body as thick as a bucket, crawling over from the sand behind him. There are two dark red flesh membrane wings covered with blue veins on the back, which are tightly wrapped on the snake's body. I don't know how spectacular it will be when unfolded. The snake had a hideous head and was blind in one eye. On the top of his head is a crooked black beret, with a serious expression similar to that of a human being. Solved. The strange snake with a human face suddenly opened its mouth and stared at Wei Wei from the mirror. The mourner trembled and made a hoarse sound. The voice has an elder-like thickness. A bright smile appeared on Wei Wei's face, and he nodded lightly, as if he had just finished helping the old lady cross the road. The worry in the black python's eyes grew even stronger, and he asked tentatively, "Where's the bullet?" "It's all used up." Black Python fell silent, and after a while, he sighed helplessly, "Does it have to be enough to fire all the bullets every time?" "Of course not, instructor." Wei Wei straightened his bow tie and said with a smile, "It's not enough if you run out of bullets." The strange snake suddenly didn't know what to say, and the vertical pupil in the Oneid showed a helpless expression. The car started quietly, and drove forward slowly along the abandoned road without street lights under the starlight. The abandoned old building behind was thrown farther and farther, and no one knew what happened in the old building. On the outside, it even looks like nothing happened. Still pay attention. The strange python appeared in the rear-view mirror. It didn't know when it got into the car, but its body was smaller. The dark red Oneid still stared at Wei Wei, full of worry and advice. "You haven't officially taken office, and you are not officially protected." "Well." Wei Wei glanced at the map unfolding in front of the co-pilot, and said with a smile, "When it's done, you'll be almost there." In the place where Wei Wei's eyes swept, there was a small town, which he circled with a red pen. There is the Scrap Iron City, a small city on the edge of the third city circle, adjacent to the wilderness. According to the data, the population of the town is not much, only less than 1 million. In the plan of the Quafa Group's barriers, this is already the edge of the edge. Almost to the point of being thrown away. Wei Wei was on his way to this place to report. "Is this a problem of not getting anywhere?" The instructor was very annoyed by Wei Wei's way of chatting, and he couldn't help but raise his voice. But Wei Wei smiled and glanced at it in the rear-view mirror. He was obedient, and his anger was like hitting cotton. "It's impossible to kill." The instructor's voice seemed a little helpless, and he resisted and persuaded, "It has been more than 70 years since the first secret war occurred. It is a foregone conclusion that the power of the devil penetrates into reality. They hold surreal powers such as life, power, destiny, etc., and come in the form of gods. You can never imagine how tempting this is for ordinary people, and how many people will fall for it. Wei Wei still smiled when he heard the strange python's words, devils are demons, and gods don't look like this. And these people who worship demons are just polluted monsters. The instructor was angry. Do you think that if you kill these monsters, they won't cause other troubles? Like this one just now, he has mastered the production method of folding space at a young age. Do you think he is an ordinary person? Even if I can erase some traces for you, if someone wants to check, I am not sure whether check your head. So what? Wei Wei said with a smile, the people who came over should also be killed. The instructor suddenly fell silent. It suddenly found that this guy seemed to have said something serious in a joking tone. Instructor, isn't this what you taught us? In the silence of the instructor, Wei Wei, who was driving seriously, suddenly explained something unexpected. Gods are images imagined by human beings when they are fighting against natural disasters and sufferings that cannot be resisted. They are also the first firewall to prevent our mental breakdown when we can bear suffering and setbacks. But now, these gods who were originally entrusted with hope and beauty, but they reveal their true nature and face, like a virus corroding the spirit and order of the world. What should we do? Speaking of which, he smiled, but his expression was serious. God has become a devil, so who will protect this world? Of course we come by ourselves. The instructor fell silent. He wanted to say something, but he just felt powerless to argue. After a long time, it let out a low sigh, looked through the rearview mirror and landed on Wei Wei's face. Tell me, Wei. Why do you have to go back to this small place? Wei Wei was stared at by it with a somewhat unnatural expression, and said, this is my home. Family. The instructor sneered, you have no home here, and no family. Wei Wei pursed the corners of his mouth and did not answer. But the instructor's tone suddenly became a little hard, like a teacher who couldn't bear to scold his students. Wei, it's really not easy for you to get to this point. Among the more than 300 students, only a few of you have graduated. Your class is the best graduate in history. Look at your classmates, some of them have joined the Xingtian team, some have entered the foundation as an intern, and no matter how difficult it is, they have chosen the most suitable consortium to become their employers. Whether it is to have a better life in the future, or to try to further improve yourself, only you are willing to return to such a small place. I'm not like them. Wei Wei interrupted it and said with a smile, Instructor, they are all top students, I am a poor student. The instructor was stunned and couldn't help but say, well, your evaluation on the mental health test is really not very high. The instructor's daily offline made Wei Wei too emotionally incoherent. After a pause, he said, in addition, you understand, instructor. Although we did come out of a training camp, they all chose this place voluntarily. And I was forced to. Their path is also from it was arranged from the beginning, and I knew what I was supposed to do when I came out. I didn't know what I was training for from the beginning. Now that I have graduated, of course I don't know what to do. I have no direction and goals. So, isn't it the best option to go home? Facing Wei Wei's sudden seriousness, the instructor was stunned, unable to speak. After a while, it suddenly shook his head helplessly. All right, anyway, it's no longer in the first city's defense circle, how much looser it is. It tried to find itself a step down, changed a tone, and said, also, I will send you to the place later. I should go back. If you need anything, just tell me, I will try my best to satisfy you, but I still hope. Bullet. Before it could finish speaking, Wei Wei took over with a smile and said, I have used up all the bullets I have saved. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. The instructor was helpless. After you take office, you can directly apply for special bullets from the squad. How many bullets can there be in this small place? Wei Wei immediately questioned. Don't talk about green-headed ghosts and red angels, even the lowest level mung bean flies can't get much, right? The instructor's angry voice suddenly raised. Do you really take this as an ordinary bullet? This is the power given to you by the Foundation. Sometimes a bullet is a kill quota. It's not enough for you to take away all the bullets I saved in private. I'll just go back and give you the entire electromagnetic pulse bullet to destroy this place. Can you wipe it off the map? This. Wei Wei seemed a little moved, and tentatively said, "It is said that you can apply for this thing only when you are in the 7th state." The instructor immediately fainted. After a while, it said feebly, "Forget it, I'll go back and use my personal relationship to give you a little extra. But remember, people who are polluted by demons are killed. If they are not polluted. If I kill anyone who isn't contaminated." Wei Wei's expression suddenly became serious. He pursed the corner of his lower lip, and said, "You come to kill me, I will not resist." The instructor looked at his serious look and fell silent. After a long time, he let out a low sigh and said, "Wei, do you know why your final evaluation was not high?" Wei Wei was stunned, "Because I didn't have the money to give the instructor a gift at the time." "What nonsense!" The instructor was a little annoyed, and after a while he said, "It's not just for this reason. The original plan was to send Wei Wei to Scrap Iron City to report, but the instructor failed to hold on for the last few hours. It left early. Just before leaving, Wei Wei hugged his neck and begged, promising to deliver new bullets within a month. Wei Wei, on the other hand, drove his jeep by himself and quietly drove to this marginal town. In the early morning, when the sun finally shone on this dark land, Wei Wei drove into the old gas station on the west side of this marginal town. Taking the time of refueling, he glanced at this small city from a distance that he had not returned for 3 years, and saw streets and buildings that seemed to be older than 3 years ago, as well as more got some traffic and drilling rigs. He couldn't tell if it was gratification or emotion, but he suddenly felt a sense of calm. In the distance, the quarry workers who got off the night shift are walking lazily to the town in 2s and 3s. Some still hold steamed buns and fritters in their hands, nibbling on them as they walk. The nun of the Church of the Faceless God by the road had opened the door and was drying dried sweet potatoes on the concrete floor. In the distance, sick and homeless children in sacks were rummaging through the mountains of garbage to find the baby they needed. Everything is so familiar, but there is a sense of alienation for 3 years. But, finally came back. Scrap Iron City. A small town with a population of less than 1 million, before the radiation force of the Spiritual Barrier Project covered it, it was just a gathering place for homeless people who made a living by selling and collecting scrap iron. Later, the barrier plan was included in the third city circle, and it was still on the edge of the edge. Only a quarry was developed and there was a poor oil well, which barely made it a little pillar industry. But if you say you get rich by working, there is no such possibility. Probably because of this gloomy future, the faces of the people here seem to be covered with a gloom. Wei Wei entered the town along the dilapidated road that crossed from the town. Along the way, he saw a giant clown standing at the entrance of the town, because the line had not been repaired for a long time, resulting in 2 giant clowns with only one eye like a beacon. It stared at this one eye with an exaggerated smile on its face. Looking at every vehicle that drove into the small town, the hat in his hand didn't seem like a salute. No matter how you look at it, it looks like you want to throw it out and hit someone. At the entrance of the bar, which is halfway through the door, there are 2s and 3s of young people dressed in fancy clothes and covered with silver nails. Behind the glass window of the butcher's shop, an unshaved pig's head was placed on the table, facing the vehicles and pedestrians on the street. The pig's mouth is long and narrow, and it always looks like it's smiling. Broken, depraved, rough. Wei Wei sat in the jeep and drove slowly through the street. The street scenes made him feel particularly familiar. This small town seems to have always been like this. It also seems that it will continue like this until it is destroyed by some unknown disaster one day. However, this seems to be a common phenomenon in countless small towns that have been abandoned or disappeared. Under the influence of certain forces, the influx of madness towards the super metropolis, while the medium-sized and small-scale cities are covered with a desolate and dilapidated temperament, under the hazy sky, like weeds in the wilderness gradually lost its vitality. Everything stems from that mysterious Big Bang. 70 years ago, the world was still prosperous and life was stable, but suddenly, a strange explosion occurred. In the whole world, everyone suddenly felt the violent turmoil, saw the firelight, heard the strong explosion, like an unprecedented huge explosion, swept the whole world. However, after just a few seconds, the terrified people found that nothing had changed in front of them. The sun is still shining and the building is intact. The violent explosion just now seemed to be just an illusion. But if it's just a person's hallucination, it's easy to explain, but everyone in the world has such hallucinations. Everyone was stumped by this question. Countless experts and scholars from all over the world gathered together to try to give an explanation to this mysterious explosion. But they have done countless research and exploration, and in the end they can only say that this is a rare collective hallucination. This answer is the official unified statement. But obviously, this problem cannot satisfy everyone at all. For a time, various discussions and conjectures emerged one after another on the internet and among the people. Some people think this is a signal from the universe that the countdown to some kind of alien attack has begun. Some people also said that the explosion really happened, and everyone died collectively at that moment. Now, the whole world is dead. All kinds of conjectures are arguing with each other, and no one can convince the other. The mysterious explosion did not seem to have caused any physical changes, but it triggered a strong worldwide panic and anxiety, and as this emotion fermented, more and more problems were triggered, diseases were prevalent, and regional wars continued, a variety of energy sources were dry, social problems emerged one after another, and the 70-year-long Great Recession of world civilization also began at that time, and the curtain was drawn. Of course, many people don't know that, and more importantly, the devil has come to reality. Gently rubbing his face, Wei Wei brought his attention back to reality. He recognized the streets that seemed to have changed a lot in the past 3 years, and slowly drove towards the center of the city. The place he was going to was the superhuman garrison base of Scrap Iron City. Because of the emergence of surreal demonic forces and the great harm that these forces have caused to social order and public safety, the world's major multinational corporations, consortia, and the World Government Alliance, the Institute of Mysterious Forces and other institutions have jointly established the the General Transactions Foundation, which investigates, records, researches, cleans up, and utilizes demons and all anomalous things. The Paranormal Research and Investigation Section planned and established by the Foundation is a secret agency specially designed to purify and deal with these events. Every city with a population of more than 1 million is stationed at a special base directly under the jurisdiction of the Foundation. In the base, there is a team of transcendents with the ability to investigate and purify various types of dangerous events, known as Extraordinary Sheriff. Of course, based on the size of the city, the strength and conditions of each base also have strengths and weaknesses. Although according to the instructor's words, Wei Wei's coming here is not conducive to future development, but Wei Wei must come back. When passing through Central Street, he deliberately turned a corner and looked at a low-rise apartment building from a distance. It was an apartment building with only about 3 floors, located in the surrounding tall buildings. This is a small building that looks ordinary from the outside. It is dark and has no lights, as if it has been uninhabited for a long time. Wei Wei slowed down a little, took a deep look at the building, and a shadow flashed in his eyes. Then he stopped delaying, increased his speed, and left quickly. 10 minutes later, the jeep stopped in front of an inconspicuous building in Scrap Iron City. Judging from the address, this is the base of the mysterious thing processing team stationed in Scrap Iron City. However, compared to the mysterious and weird temperament of the work they were responsible for, this small building was obviously too normal. When Wei Wei walked into this small base, he saw a warm scene. At the entrance, there is a small signboard with black characters on a white background, Scrap Iron City Environmental Protection Workstation. Environmental Protection. Looking at the name of this small base, Wei Wei had a preliminary understanding of the colleagues in this place. Due to certain confidentiality and security needs, these action teams stationed in various cities often choose their own disguise. For this kind of camouflage, there are no mandatory norms and requirements above, so teams from all over the world can choose the camouflage style independently, and in the process, they show a strong personal color, and there are all kinds of styles. There are those who pretend to be security companies, which have a strong will to protect them. There are people who pretend to be detective agencies, because they have a strong desire for knowledge about supernatural things. There are those who pretend to be the Hunter Guild, which values bounty more than honor. In addition, I heard that there are people who are disguised as slaughterhouses. Their team ranks at the top of the supernatural creature hunting list all the year round. The small base in front of me has the name of an environmental protection organization, so it can be literally understood as, they pay more attention to messing around and nonsense. Wei Wei let out a light breath, entered through the modern-looking glass door, and looked at the unit he was about to join. Inside is a reception hall, behind the curved table is empty, no one is there. Passing through the report hall, it turned out to be a small courtyard with two people playing billiards with a pole. Who is bushy, but there is not a single hair on his head. The other has black, smooth, and long hair, with a long ponytail tied at the back of his head. His skin is smooth and fair, and he is more handsome than a beauty. Wei Wei stared deeply at his chest and crotch, making sure that his gaze was not a hooligan. He is indeed a man more handsome than a beauty. Next to him was a man who weighed at least 300 catties. He squatted in front of the stove and fanned the flames. There was a pot on it, which was full of meat. It's them. Wei Wei thought about the materials he had read, and nodded secretly. Then he put a polite smile on his face, leaned forward, and said to the bearded man who was turning his head, If you have something to do, go to the executive office. We don't collect junk here, nor do we dig stinky ditches. I didn't say that, I'm looking for Captain Yang. Looking for Captain Yang. When the other party heard that Wei Wei called out the captain's name, his expression suddenly became serious. Come back after get off work to collect gambling debts. Wei Wei felt that he accidentally knew more about this director Yang. Shaking his head with a smile, he raised his voice a little and said solemnly, My name is Wei Wei, I'm here to report. Report. The bearded man was slightly surprised. He put down his club, looked at Wei Wei, and said, Is you the new transferee? As soon as these words came out, the handsome opponent who was playing billiards with the bearded man and the fat man who was squatting beside the stove watching the stewing meat turned around in surprise and looked at Wei Wei curiously. And kept looking at it. Wei Wei smiled and nodded to the crowd, Yes, hello seniors. Ouch. The bearded eyes swept across Wei Wei's somewhat worn jacket and slightly immature face, and he seemed to be able to see the surprise in his eyes, but he immediately covered it up. His face softened and smiled and shook hands with Wei Wei. He started and said, I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to be so young. I heard the captain said you would come, wait here for a while, and I'll help you go to his office and call him. Wei Wei also said politely, It doesn't matter, why don't you play first and I'll go over by myself. No way. The bearded man shook his head, pursed his lips mysteriously, and walked towards the end of the yard with the cue stick. Going up the steps, there is an office with a closed door. The bearded man eavesdropped on for a while, and suddenly pushed the door and entered. Is the captain here? What? There was a woman's scream inside. Then, there was a chaotic sound in the office, and a pink lady's underwear was thrown onto the bearded head. Wei Wei looked at the scene in front of him and was a little stunned. In broad daylight, this is... Oh, what are you doing? Soon, a well-dressed man with a suit and vest with grey hair and gold-rimmed glasses walked out in the office. He is very handsome, and the first impression to people is that he is unimaginably handsome. It is hard to imagine how charming he will be when he is young, a man who is so handsome. However, with such a good image, his movements are a little embarrassing. Reading www.youcanshu. Coming walked while pulling the zipper of the front door, complaining at the bearded man who was giggling and grinning. "You can't do this anymore, I'm too old to be scared." As he spoke, he glanced at him and saw Wei Wei standing in the yard, with a smile on his face. "Are you the little Wei that the personnel department called earlier?" He smiled and said, "My name is Yang Jian, and I'm our captain here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Wei Wei looked up and saw a plump woman walking out of the office behind him. With a lazy attitude, heavy makeup, wearing a nearly transparent white skirt, she turned her head lazily and went out through the back door. Wei Wei immediately determined what the captain was doing just now. Instead of shaking his hand, he took a cautious and honest step back, raised 3 fingers, and gave him a salute. "Hello, Captain." Captain Yu Yang also came to his senses, took back his palm embarrassedly, and said with an embarrassed smile, "Hello, hello, come with me." Instead of taking Wei Wei back to the office behind him, he took Wei Wei back to the hall in the front yard. Opening a side door and sitting down, he wiped his hands with a wet towel and put on his reading glasses. Only then did he open the document Wei Wei brought over, examine it for a moment, and keep nodding his head. "Okay, okay." Wei Wei, 19 years old, the 13th trainee of Dongshan Tengshi training camp. The graduation evaluation is A. The instructor's recommendation is, the student is excellent in both character and study, kind and shy, serious and meticulous in work, civilized and disciplined. Wei Wei was stunned, then nodded sincerely, "Yes, it's me. It's good, very good. I didn't expect that our team would welcome such excellent professionals." Captain Yu Yang seemed to welcome Wei Wei's arrival. While speaking warmly, he reviewed all the information and documents, and the more he read, the more satisfied he became. Being in a formal training camp, it is better than those of us who are wild. Is much stronger. As he spoke, he lowered his voice slightly and said, "Xiao Wei, is it inconvenient for you to reveal your sequence?" "Of course." Wei Wei hurriedly replied with a smile, "I am the life sequence, and I am currently in the first form. Many extraordinary people don't like to expose their core sequence, so as not to be judged by others and targeted. Therefore, it is somewhat impolite to ask the sequence directly in the superhuman industry. However, there is no need for Wei Wei to conceal it. He has already come here to report, so the ability to conceal is unnecessary. Besides, I have my future leader in front of me, and I have to report to myself according to regulations." Yang Jian could have asked directly, but he was so careful, which showed that the leader was indeed very polite to people. Sequence of life. When Captain Yang heard this, he was slightly startled and seemed a little puzzled. Living in a small town on the edge, he didn't know much about the training camp. He just heard that it was a very mysterious place, and a lot of amazing people have been born from it. But he never expected that Wei Wei would be a number the most extraordinary life sequence. There are many extraordinary people in the life sequence, and with life as the core, many types of abilities can also be born. However, the low-level life sequence superhumans mostly master some abilities of self-healing, perception, and imitation. No one will underestimate these abilities, but it must be admitted that these abilities do not play a big role in purification and confrontation. Just like in the wilderness, people with other types of wild abilities may have some self-preservation abilities. Some even deliberately disclose their abilities in exchange for others' reverence and trust in them. However, the ability of the life type is quite strict. For fear of being accidentally found out, it will be directly captured by some consortium or forces in the wilderness and made into a life battery. Captain Yang didn't mean to discriminate against the demons of life, but he couldn't help but murmured in his heart, "It's not the only level of training camp background, right?" However, there was no doubtful expression on his face at all, he was still full of admiration, and continued, "Not bad." After speaking, he closed the document, with a kind smile on his face. He said to Wei Wei, "Where are you from, Xiao Wei?" Wei Wei smiled and said, "It's here, I'm a local, so I applied for it back." Captain Yu Yang immediately glanced at him and said with a smile, "No wonder I think you look familiar, where do you live?" Wei Wei also smiled gently, "I haven't come back for many years. I used to live outside the city and rarely came into the city. Now, my family is gone. I just passed by and looked at the original house. It has also been demolished. Outside the city." Captain Yu Yang suddenly frowned, as if thinking of something. But his expression quickly relaxed again, nodded repeatedly, saying that it was fine, and then returned Wei Wei's document to him, but the document was put into a document bag and sealed. He got up and said to Wei Wei, "Okay, I'll go through the formalities later. You're a member of our team. Come with me. I'll introduce you to our team members. Let's have dinner together in the evening." "Okay." Wei Wei put away his documents and stood up meekly. In the yard at this time, the fat man who was squatting on the ground and stewing the meat had already set up a big round table. The pot of meat was placed in the middle of the table, next to a few baskets of green vegetables and meatballs, and small bowls were placed around them. Chopsticks and stools, etc. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." Captain Yu Yang came to the yard, smiled and beckoned, and said to everyone, "This is the investigator who was just sent to us for an internship, his name is Wei Wei, and he came from a regular training camp. People should learn more. Come on, put the club down, come and say hello first." When everyone came close, they turned their heads and smiled at Wei Wei. "This is basically the team members we will act together in the future. There are only 6 people in our team, plus 7 of you. Now one is on duty in the guard hall, and there is another intern team member like you. The remaining 4 are here. Let's get to know each other. It's good to be in harmony," said, pointed to the bearded man among the 3, and introduced to Wei Wei, "Chen Qiang, everyone calls him Uncle Gun, who is in charge of the investigation." "Investigation? That should be the reinforcement system." Wei Wei smiled and nodded to the bearded man, "Hello, Uncle Gun, give me some advice." The bearded man smiled and said, "It's easy to talk, people from big places are really polite. In fact, according to the agreement between the Foundation and the major financial groups and administrative agencies at the beginning of its establishment, the Foundation has no law enforcement power. Therefore, the name of the supernatural institution affiliated to the Foundation is only the Research and Investigation Department of Supernatural Things," highlighting the word investigation. "Its main responsibility is to find out the origin of the affairs, warn or predict the coming of certain disasters in time, and give local armed solutions. However, because of the special danger caused by demon power, there is often no room for people to investigate calmly. Therefore, confrontation in the investigation process is inevitable, and sometimes even becomes a very critical part. Over time, it has become a phenomenon recognized by the industry. Investigation also often represents strength. Among the 12 demon pathways that are common today, there are not many people who are good at confrontation, but this is the first time we meet. Wei Wei can't see whether this bearded man belongs to the death demon pathway, or is a rarer war demon. Wei Wei was curious, but didn't ask. Although they are in the same team, as a newcomer, it is still difficult to ask such sensitive questions directly. Captain Yu Yang smiled again and pointed at the man with a ponytail, as handsome as a woman, and said, "Lin Feng Jiao. He is in charge of intelligence analysis in our team, and he also wrote the incident report to the executive office." When the man with the ponytail heard his name, his expression was a little unnatural, and he immediately added to Wei Wei, "Just call me Xiao Linear." "Okay, Brother Xiaolin." Wei Wei glanced at him, smiled and nodded. Most analysts have the ability to collect intelligence and analyze surreal logic, and I don't know which one he belongs to. Or, both. While thinking about it, Wei Wei set his eyes on the last fat man with a smile on his face. This is amazing. Captain Yu Yang said with a smile, this is Piglet, he is responsible for the aftermath of the mission, but not only the aftermath, he is also responsible for the logistics, chores, material procurement, emotional analysis, and spiritual comfort of our team. This. Hearing the series of names, Wei Wei was awestruck and took the initiative to step forward to shake hands. Brother Piggy. I've even met a few people, and it's amazing. After listening to it for a long time, I couldn't guess what type he was. But you can never underestimate the most inconspicuous person in the team, maybe he is hiding the boss. No, don't be so polite. Fatty hurriedly got up and shook hands with Wei Wei, and said very enthusiastically, let's have dinner together at night, I just happened to cook a little more. Yes, we'll have dinner together later, and I'll go through the onboarding procedures for you, arrange dormitory and so on. Captain Yu Yang also smiled and said, also, Sister Lucky will come back for dinner later. You guys will just get to know each other later. Okay. Wei Wei smiled and nodded in agreement. He also had a preliminary understanding of this Scrap Iron City team. Scrap Iron City is a remote town, even in the outermost third city circle, it is extremely small. The transcendent team stationed here is naturally not much stronger. The few people in front of them seem to be lazy and untrained, and they should be pure-blooded wild powers. The world was in chaos for a long time after the behemoth of the United Church collapsed. In order to combat the three types of dangers emerging in the world, and to turn these potential dangers into their own help, the Foundation once recruited a large number of wild superhumans at a high cost, and exchanged favorable treatment and stabilizers for their effectiveness. For a long time, they were the main force against mysterious events and dangers. Only in recent years have there been people from training camps. In addition to formal training and scientific reinforcement, there are essential differences between those with wild abilities and those from training camps. Fall risk. After the First Secret War, these extraordinary powers that cannot be explained by scientific principles have appeared together with those demon fragments that have invaded reality. They were once promoted by the United Church and infected many people who were completely defenseless. And being infected by the power of demons often has only two results, or, it was corroded step by the power of the devil, gradually lost his sanity, and completely turned into a monster. The Tree of Flesh, the Legion of the Undead, Hell species, and other strange supernatural creatures all belong to this category. The other is that under the influence of Devil's Whisper, he is willing to succumb to the devil and become its fanatic. Worship the devil, follow the devil, everything is based on the devil's instructions, willing to be the enemy of the world. However, there are always exceptions. Among the countless infected people, there are some lucky third groups. After they were infected by demon power, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com still maintained their sobriety and rationality, as if immune to the distorted desires brought by the demon's will, but because of this they mastered the surreal power belonging to the demon, became a wild ability. Seems lucky, but many people have been wary of them. Because of their immunity, so far, there has not been a credible and convincing explanation. Because they are not sure why they are immune to the influence of demon consciousness, correspondingly, no one can guarantee whether the firewall in their will is strong, and whether this good person in front of them will suddenly degenerate the next day, turned into a bloodthirsty monster. Or maybe one night, I suddenly heard the whispers of the devil, and the bewildered mind became a devil believer. Even, he is a demon believer himself, but disguised as a sober capable person. It is for these reasons that a considerable part of the Foundation is vigilant against those with wild abilities. Most of these wild abilities are also gathered in the third city circle of the Bulwark of Wool project, which is rarely seen in the first and second city circles. However, Wei Wei didn't care about that. He knew in his heart that until now, the researchers at the top of the foundation have still not understood the nature and source of these powers, but have mastered more and more controllable method. It's just that it's controllable, but who knows? In the training camp, there are also a lot of people who have turned into monsters because of their mental breakdown. Although it seems that the wild powers have some psychological problems because of the pollution of demons, but these days, who hasn't gotten sick yet? Xiaowei is here on the first day today to add some dishes. The tableware and stools have been set up, and a pot of meat has been heated with the alcohol stove. But because Miss Lucky, who was on duty at the security office, didn't come back, everyone was embarrassed to move the chopsticks first. It was also at this time that Wei Wei understood the working rules of this small branch. The unconventional transaction processing team is not an administrative agency in the normal sense, but it has a deep and close connection with the executive office, so it has formed a distinct but inseparable cooperation model. The public security and the handling of normal incidents are handled by the administration office and the security office, but once it is suspected that there are extraordinary factors involved, the incident will be transferred to the team. Before I came, there were a total of 6 people, except for the intern team member who did not talk to me. The other 5 people would go to the guard hall on duty from Monday to Friday in turn, monitor them at any time, and screen out possible extraordinary events in time to be processed. As for the rest of the people, they are basically free to act. When nothing happens, it can even be understood that he only works 1 day a week, but receives a high salary. The left and right were also waiting. Captain Yu Yang took advantage of this time to go to the office to deal with Wei Wei's entry, clean up his image by the way, and waved his hand, ordering his subordinates to prepare more dishes as a welcome to Wei Wei. Ceremony. Anyway, it will take a while for Miss Lucky to come back, can't you take a shot first? The bearded Uncle Gun smiled and sent an invitation to Wei Wei, and gestured with the club. Wei Wei is not good at playing billiards, but since he was a newcomer, he wanted to have a good relationship with his colleagues, so he agreed with a smile. Can you play ball? Uncle Gun measured it and handed Wei Wei a thick rod. Less likely. Wei Wei said with a smile, I only know that violence produces miracles. Saying that, the pop shot went out, and the table full of exploded, and 2 were actually scored. Wei Wei immediately felt that his performance in the first team was very good. But when he lost 1 shot and Uncle Gun picked up the club with a smile, Wei Wei realized that he seemed to be wrong. The bearded Uncle Gun looked ordinary, but the moment he held the club and leaned over to pull his arms, his posture was exceptionally beautiful. There is a kind of muscles, bones, eyes, attention, even the slightly larger belly and the shaggy beard are strictly unified, every inch of skin and muscles are adjusted to the position where they should be, just like the ancient Greek master craftsman carving statue coming out. He is not perfect, but his posture at this moment gives people a feeling of perfection. Snapped. Uncle Gun didn't seem to exert any force, and the white ball flew out confidently, letting a ball touch Siku and pocket it. Wei Wei was a little dumbfounded. Then Uncle Gun laughed. He shot the shot briskly, as if he didn't need to aim at all. He just shot the shot easily in a natural way. They seemed to have their own lives. Dig into each hole. Every shot was extremely precise, crisp, and neat. A total of 5 shots were made before and after, and the table was cleared, one of which was still a double shot. How to beat this level? Wei Wei looked at the pole that he had no chance to shoot, and his face was a little weird. Hey, little brother, I'm the law department. The bearded man hugged the club and smiled proudly. A dozen years ago, when Uncle and I were still living in the famine team, I was bitten by a stone ghost in an abandoned town and got infected, but my life was tough. It didn't turn into a petrified monster, and since then, both physical strength and nerves have been greatly improved, especially in terms of accuracy, which has been unimaginable before. Unfortunately, we can't participate in various competitions, otherwise I would really like to play a career. Seeing Uncle Gunny's smug look, Wei Wei shook his head and smiled bitterly, giving up the shot and admitting defeat. Who can beat this? It turned out to be the Wild Sequence 5, Law Demon. Wei Wei nodded, and immediately understood all these abnormal performances. Corresponding to this series is the former God of Law and the current Devil of Law. Because of their observance of the rules, their every move abnormally tends to the best standard. Whether it's living habits or work and rest, if it goes on step by step, its physical strength, muscles, heartbeat, and blood. Extending it again, it spreads to his own behavior, and even to the operation of various precision machinery. They believe in the golden ratio, which allows their behavior to be infinitely close to the most precise standard. However, it can also be seen at a glance that this Uncle Gun has little potential. Extraordinary people who are disciplined tend to make their living habits strict, and strict is a must. And look at Uncle Gun's big belly, and his teeth blackened from smoking. Staying in the training camp, this will be beaten by the instructor hanging from a tree. And this Uncle Gun, the type of obtaining demon ability, is also extremely common. There are many ways for ordinary people to gain demon power, but there are only 3 types of them that are most common. 1. Just like myself, because I was specially selected, I took the initiative to start reinforcement and control experiments. 1. Those with wild abilities like Captain Yu Yang and the others. There is another. In front of Wei Wei's eyes, the bar passing by on the road flashed past, a gloomy look flashed across his face. This is the craziest kind. Actively approached and even surrendered to those demons, accepted their orders, and sacrificed to them according to the ritual. Please treat the devil like a and get his reward. Why don't you say this in front of Miss Lucky? Just as Wei Wei was slightly distracted with the club, someone suddenly picked up the conversation. The handsome Lin Fengjiao, who was helping Piglet wash the enoki mushrooms, seemed to be worried that Wei Wei would be depressed by being beaten by Uncle Gun. He turned around and said with a smile, "We don't like to play with this guy. We wanted to sell the table several times. It would be nice to change to a mahjong table, but when I thought of the embarrassing appearance he played with Miss Lucky every time, I felt relieved. The table is here to stay." Why? Wei Wei was a little surprised. He couldn't imagine what kind of person could win against someone with such precise control. Because Sister Lucky is just like her name, and the core is lucky. She was once blessed by a mysterious power and has luck that is hard for ordinary people to imagine. Therefore, if you play billiards with her, as long as if she wants to win, even if she plays with her eyes closed, the ball will go into the hole at various unimaginable angles, and the opponent's skill is useless. The bearded Uncle Gun next to him smiled bitterly. It's not that you lose every time. You can also play 5 to 5 with skill. What do you say? He scratched his head. Playing with her makes it easy for people to doubt life. Lucky flow. Wei Wei was slightly surprised. Sequence 10, Lucky Devil. Demon power has penetrated into the human world, bringing all kinds of unimaginable extraordinary power, which has always been the focus of the Foundation's research. According to the number of infected people affected by these demonic forces, they made different serial numbers. The higher the number of infected people, the higher the serial number. For example, the Life Demon pathway is ranked first in the 12 Master Demon system. The Sequence 10 Lucky Demon system is already at the end of the list, and it is almost the type with the smallest number. However, the higher the serial number, the scarcer the ability. Usually, the senior management attaches great importance to it and is willing to pay a high price to solicit it. Even those with wild abilities can often open up and enter the first and second city lines, and even some special central institutions. Since she has such ability, why should she stay here? With a little curiosity, Wei Wei rejected Uncle Bearded Gun's invitation for another shot, and took the initiative to join the piggies' camp. Considering that the newcomer Wei Wei came to the team to report on the first day, Captain Yu Yang took out his collection of single malt whiskey with a big hand, and Piglet also decided to add a few more dishes, so everyone helped by the side to prepare this lunch. Even Wei Wei didn't think about it. The first task he had returned to the scrap iron city was to clean the fresh pig intestines. She was busy working for more than an hour, and finally, when everything was ready and Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com was about to start dinner, a woman wearing a cheongsam, ping ting ting, walked in from outside, kicked her high heels, and changed pair of plastic slippers. He smiled as he approached. "It smells good." The team members all stood up to say hello, Sister Lucky. Wei Wei also looked at the woman curiously, and saw that she was tall, with delicate skin, wearing a light red cheongsam, and her hair was pulled back on top of her head. "I can't tell the exact age, I just feel that everything is just right. Whether it is the charm, the light makeup on the face, the slender waist and crystal calves, or even the white pearl necklace between the neck, they are all exquisite and perfect. Is this the woman who got the power of luck? This seems to be more reasonable." She came in just when the dishes were served and the meat was cooked. "Xiao Wei, get up and say hello to Sister Lucky." The bearded Uncle Gun reminded Wei Wei in a low voice. "She is in charge of auditing and reporting in our team." "Ayo." Wei Wei also stood up immediately, a little more enthusiastic than before. "Hello, Sister Lucky, my name is Wei Wei. Is this the newcomer you mentioned earlier?" The woman in the cheongsam sat down on the stool that others had pulled away, shook hands with Wei Wei across the table, looked him up and down with a smile, then nodded with satisfaction, and said with a smile, "He's quite handsome, you're welcome, sit down and eat. When I'm free another day, I'll accompany my sister to the mall. I'll pick out a pair of comfortable underwear for you to wear." "Thank you, Miss Lucky." Wei Wei sat down and took the initiative to hand her the cup, feeling a little strange. What's the tradition of giving underwear as soon as we meet? When everyone had arrived, everyone filled their glasses with wine and started lunch. According to his usual habits in training camp, even Wei Wei doesn't mind drinking a little wine, but he definitely won't touch it during the day. Otherwise, the tasks and training in the afternoon will be affected, and the instructor may be hung on the fan and beaten. However, Captain Yu Yang was very enthusiastic, and the others were accustomed to it, so they let them fall. After all, it's the leader's request, how can you not listen to it? Although he joined a newcomer like Wei Wei, everyone ate casually without being overly enthusiastic or unfamiliar, especially Captain Yu Yang, who complimented the piggy's craftsmanship while eating, and even talked a few times during the meal. Lu Duanzi to cheer everyone up. It wasn't until Sister Lucky glared at him that she hurriedly restrained herself, and hurriedly opened the topic and said, "Why did you come back a little late today? There is a case at the guard hall. I followed it to investigate. There are not many clues. I will continue to watch it in the afternoon." Sister Lucky answered casually and asked curiously, "By the way, didn't Fi Fei come here?" "Fi Fei?" A few other people were slightly startled and said, "Why, this eldest lady is also coming over for dinner. We talked on the phone in the morning, and she said she was coming back." Sister Lucky said, took out the phone, but when she dialed it, no one answered. It is not surprising to everyone. Now that we are in a period of great decline of civilization, coupled with the mysterious power in the wilderness, the maintenance of many facilities has been greatly affected. Even if the wool barrier plan and the formation of the super city circle have eased some troubles, however, it is also common for information base stations to be damaged and not repaired in time, and it is very common for telephones, especially wireless mobile phones, to fail. Everyone just raised their chopsticks and laughed. Maybe this eldest lady was too happy in the shopping mall and forgot the time. Didn't she ask for leave yesterday and go back to take care of the elderly at home? Are they talking about the intern now? Wei Wei thought secretly in his heart, but it was strange to hear their tone. Seeing that the intern didn't come, I didn't worry about whether there would be an accident. Instead, I looked relieved. That's right, Xiao Wei. Seeing that the phone could not get through, everyone stopped waiting, clinking glasses and drinking, and starting to eat. The bearded Uncle Gun sat next to Wei Wei. Seeing that he seemed curious, he lowered his voice and said with a smile, "Our grandfathers have opposite tempers. I won't hide it from you. I just told you about the 7 accounting skills in our team. Now, I have to tell you about the 3 taboos in our team." "What?" Wei Wei didn't expect that there were taboos in this small place, so he hurriedly put down his chopsticks and listened carefully. "The first taboo," Uncle Gun said solemnly, "the underwear that Sister Lucky chose for you must be worn. You must not secretly change it just because you dislike being ugly." Wei Wei was a little stunned. "Why?" "Don't ask, just write it down." Uncle Gun gave Wei Wei a chopstick of meat, put it in his bowl, and said, "Trust Uncle, if you wear it, you will know the benefits." "All right." Wei Wei was a little helpless, and said, "What are the other 2 taboos?" Uncle Gun lowered his voice even lower. "Second, don't listen to the captain, and don't go out with him casually. Especially when he said he treated guests." Wei Wei was surprised. Is there such a team? "The third. Thirdly, the intern named Yefei Fei must always avoid her." Just as Wei Wei pricked up his ears and listened humbly, he saw Sister Lucky suddenly turned her head and glanced at the 2 of them with a smile, her charming smile carrying a strong impact, and said, "What are you whispering about? Let me listen too, okay?" Uncle Gun suddenly hesitated. He smiled and stretched out his chopsticks to take the vegetables, eat and eat. After staying in the training camp for 3 years, Wei Wei was already used to the food there, or, in other words, got tired of it. In terms of food quality and health, the food in this small base is of course far inferior to the training camp. But the taste is undoubtedly a bit more human. Especially that pot of unknown meat, which was stewed by Brother Pig, is soft, glutinous, and fragrant. The slices are big, the mouth is full of meaty aroma, and the sauce is overflowing. It is obviously not a valuable thing, but it has both. The wonderful experience of luxury and heaviness makes people feel at ease and comfortable. The few dishes he usually cooks are also sour, crisp, refreshing and sweet. And the plate of large intestines that Brother Pig stir-fried with a stir-frying spoon made Wei Wei understand a truth. The coquettish are all put to the side, and sautéing is the king of fat intestines. Of course, as a newcomer, he also paid attention to his own image, and was not too presumptuous. He took a few chopsticks for each, 2 bowls of rice were cleanly planed, and there was no shortage of wine for the captain and the seniors. The people in the team were very impressed with this young and somewhat shy boy and were full of praise. At the end of the meal, Captain Yu Yang said, "Xiao Wei, after this meal, we are a family. I have completed your formalities, there is not so much mess in our small place, you are ready, just come here to help." Wei Wei said obediently, "Okay, Captain, what do I need to prepare?" "Game consoles, magazines, snacks, pets, it's really not good, just buy some thread to knit sweaters like Xiaolin." Otherwise, how would you pass the time?" "Oh." On the first day of the report, Wei Wei felt that he had fallen in love with this place. Captain Yu Yang felt a long sigh of relief when he saw Wei Wei's obedient agreement and no objection. He is a good boy. To tell the truth, at first I heard that he came from a professional training camp, and I was really worried that there would be another one who is dedicated to work and wouldn't be able to play with everyone. Who likes struggling critics? His face became more and more pleasant, and he said to Wei Wei, "By the way, how do you plan to arrange the place to live? I'll pack a room for you here or?" "No, I'm going to rent a house to live in." Wei Wei shook his head with a smile, and said, "It's not too far from here, but maybe I need the captain to say hello to me." Oh. Captain Yu Yang said happily, "It's okay, the team will pay, where do you want to rent it?" Wei Wei thought about it carefully, and smiled, "Apartment 7, 15th block, room 302. Number 7 in the 15th block." Captain Yu Yang repeated a sentence subconsciously, suddenly realized something, and his expression was slightly horrified. Wei Wei nodded to the captain warmly and calmly, and said with a smile, Yes, this is the place. If it's inconvenient to be in the team, I can rent it out at my own expense, but the situation there is a bit special, and it may be necessary for the captain and the executive office. Just say hi. Then he looked at the time and said, "It's still early, I still have time to go over and clean up." Captain Yu Yang was silent for a while, then a smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Okay." This time, Captain Yu Yang acted very neatly, and everyone in the team was a little surprised. After confirming that Wei Wei wanted to live in this place, he immediately made a phone call to the administrative office of the Scrap Iron City. After a while, a rental package was sent to their small police station. Wei Wei helped to clean up the dishes and decided that there was nothing left to do in the afternoon, so he planned to go back to clean up the house first. He took the formalities and contracts and got on the jeep at the gate of his police station. When he entered the city again, he drove over to the house that he had taken a deep look at. The whole road was full of smiles on his face. Slowly disappeared. The jeep was parked downstairs. Wei Wei, who was not full, bought a pancake and fruit from the stall and went upstairs while eating. The scene when he walked up the stairs 3 years ago could not help but emerge in his mind. He stood in front of the door for a while, and slowly finished the last piece of crispy. Then he wiped his hands and slowly inserted the key sent by the executive office into the keyhole. Pat! With a soft sound, the door opened. A peculiar musty smell came out, and it seemed to contain some strange smells. In front of Wei Wei's eyes, the smiling face of a beautiful woman wearing a red apron seemed to appear. Memories overlapped with reality. The amazing beauty of that woman and her hideousness later left a deep impression on him. He slowly walked into the room and looked at the dark old house, covered with layers of dusty furniture. The layout that was deeply imprinted in his mind began to flicker into scenes of memories activating in his mind. Dead green plants, dried up fishing tanks, and goldfish with only bones left in them, human figures drawn with chalk and distorted shapes on the floor, and specially circled ones on the walls. Yu reading www.yuuganchu.com looks to have turned into a black splattered bloodstain. There seems to be a piece of the brain that is beating suddenly. Wei Wei stood quietly in the room for a long time, before pacing lightly and walking around the house. Living room, dining room, bathroom, bedroom, balcony. Except for the memorable big round table, there was nothing noteworthy for a while. Unable to find new clues, Wei Wei was already mentally prepared. After all, it's been so long. After turning around, he sat down on the dusty sofa in this room and quietly looked at the ceiling. A long time. At the same time, after sending Wei Wei away with a smile on his face, Captain Yu Yang's expression suddenly changed slightly, and he turned around and entered the small data room of the police station. Finally got a thin folder, and then he took out the pages in the folder, glanced at the contents above, and let out a low sigh. Is it him? At some point, a graceful figure in a cheongsam appeared outside the archives and asked softly. Through the dazzling and pale sunlight in the afternoon, he saw an old newspaper in the captain's hand under the shadow of the archive room. What appeared on the newspaper was a pale boy, covered in blood, staring helplessly at the camera. Shouldn't he be dead? After being silent for a while, the cheongsam woman said, "What does his profile say?" Secret. Captain Yu Yang gave a wry smile and said, "Except for some nonsense words, everything else is kept secret." At the beginning of the night, the street lights came on one by one. It started to rain in the afternoon, and there was a damp smell on the street. The central street under the street lights is more lively than during the day. The neon lights outside the bar have been lit up, complementing the restaurants, karaoke, and foot massage. Looking through the falling rain threads, streaks of beating rainbow light were formed and twisted across the street. People who have gone through heavy work during the day, with wine bottles in their hands, cross their shoulders and laugh loudly in the rain. On both sides, the gloomy old man silently burned paper money. A black Bentley came slowly from the other side of the street, forming a silent confrontation with the drunk. Just park here and I'll walk over by myself. In the car, a female voice said anxiously, and after a while, the door was opened. The Bentley is an extremely luxurious car, with an arrogance that is out of place in this cluttered street. But the girl who got out of the car somewhat resembled this street. She was wearing delicately tailored clothes and a pair of black pony boots. The style was simple, but it was worth a lot of money. Whether it is her delicate facial features or her slender figure, she has a temperament that makes people brighten up others' eyes. However, now there is a lot of mud on her clothes, even a little on her face, and there are traces of hastily wiped but not wiped clean, and there are a few tenacious cockleburrs on the black trouser legs, eyes wet, like crying. Don't you need to send it over? The voice in the car was a little unexpected, and he asked with concern. No, go back quickly, I'll go over the rest of the way, don't let anyone see it. The girl waved her hand and urged Bentley to leave quickly. And she quickly wiped her eyes and trotted towards the other end of Central Street. Yefei Fei was very distressed, irritable, sad, wronged, and angry. I obviously just went home yesterday to celebrate my father's birthday, and this morning, I told Miss Lucky to report back at noon and want to eat at the restaurant. Unexpectedly, it was a total of more than 100 kilometers, but I first had a flat tire, and I called there was no signal again. When changing tires, the screw cap rolled into a hole. After digging the hole for a long time, I was almost bitten by a hibernating snake. In the end, after walking 7 or 8 kilometers on foot, I found the gas station, and found that it happened to be closed. Sadly, I waited for 2 hours, came across a car pulling pigs, and hitchhiked to a service station in the middle. When I wanted to thank them, I found that my wallet was missing somewhere. In the end, I could only cry. I called my dad. Whoever provokes me, there are always so few days every month. Now, the promised lunch is impossible, it's getting dark, and I haven't even eaten anything. Now I can only hurry to the office and ask the captain to take a leave. After all, I only asked for yesterday's leave. If you didn't go all day today, it's not considered absenteeism, right? Thinking so, she walked faster and faster, almost running in the light rain. Then, she suddenly stopped, and she noticed something out of the corner of her eyes, which made her heart skip a beat. At this time, she had just passed a lively neighborhood, a place with shadows and light. Beside him is a THRESTRE building, which looks very ordinary and old. The broken warning tape was attached to the door, shivering in the wind and rain. It seems to have been forgotten by this lively street, and it is hidden in the shadows. The surrounding, whether vehicles or pedestrians in raincoats, all hurriedly pass by here, as if they are worried that they will be contaminated with something unknown. Generally, when I usually patrol the streets, I often pass this small building, and every time I pass by at a faster pace. This time, Yefei Fei suddenly stopped, turned his head a little stiffly, and then his pupils slightly enlarged. A chill rushed into her mind, even making her feet go cold. In that dark old building, there was actually a light on, and it was on the 3rd floor. How could there be someone here? This old building was the scene of the catastrophic murder that shocked the whole city 3 years ago, and it was also the largest murder house in the scrap iron city. 3 years ago, the case was too big, and news reports emerged one after another. The 16-year-old young murderer became a nightmare in everyone's heart for a while. I don't know how many people wanted to dig out his secrets, why he came, and how he managed to kill only 6 members of a family. Killed them all with a rusty scythe. However, 3 years later, there are still many secrets in this case that no one knows. The murderer has already been executed, and the debt of death has been eliminated. However, the building has not been recovered, and other residents have already moved out and abandoned it for 3 years. I don't know how many haunted stories spread from here, stimulating people's nerves, ears, and eyes. But now, in the old abandoned building, the lights are turned on, and depending on the location, it is room 302. The crime scene 3 years ago. How come? Yeffy Fetai's scalp went numb in shock. Who broke in here? Although there was 10,000 resistance in her heart, she still turned around abruptly out of a sense of responsibility. Why is there a light in the haunted house that has been abandoned for 3 years? I haven't heard that this building was auctioned, nor that anyone moved into it. As an intern sheriff who has been on the job for a full month and a half, she knows her area very well. If someone moved into such a terrifying and weird place, the news would have spread throughout the entire area. How could she not know it? Could it be that the homeless broke in by mistake? No, the homeless shouldn't be able to turn on the light switch in the room, the building has long been powered off. What shady deals are the criminals doing here? Bah! Can't see the light and turn on the lights? Family members or relatives of the deceased? Or something else? These people shouldn't be stupid enough to come to this building at night, right? In fact, Yeffy Fetai could turn a blind eye to this lamp, but she couldn't help it, the endless curiosity tortured her heart, she still couldn't control her feet and walked towards the old building, slowly, from the gun pocket in the back waist take out a small pistol. The old building was dark, damp, and had a strong musty smell. Every step he took, Yeffy Fetai's heart sank, and he felt countless eyes staring at him in the darkness. Especially when he reached the 3rd floor, this terrifying feeling was squeezing blood into his mind. It actually made her feel excited and slightly dizzy. 32. Sure enough, it was 3 and 2. The door was ajar, and light came out from inside. In this dark corridor, it does not make people feel warm, on the contrary, there is a strong strangeness. Yeffy Fetai considered that there might be criminals in it. In order to prevent the other party from running away, she did not shout loudly in advance, but clenched the gun tightly, mustered 12 points of courage, stretched out Wei Wei's hand, and gently moved towards Su. The closed door was pushed open. Squeak! Damn it, with such a careful action, there was an unusually loud door opening. How long has this door shaft not been oiled? Just as Yeffy Fetai scolded himself for being careless, the door of the room was fully opened, and the pale incandescent light suddenly shone on him. She hurriedly adjusted her state and looked up at the door. Then she couldn't help but stay for a while. In the room, there was a man standing on a chair. The bright lights came from an oblique angle, outlining his thin figure. His head seemed to be hanging from the beam. The shadow also slowly shook. On top of his head, he wore a white hat, his hands were full of blood, and the walls were splashed with bright red. Who? Yeffy Fetai's blood rushed into his head, and he raised his gun. Anyway, I still remember what the captain told me when he gave me this gun, mainly because it was scary and not to shoot casually. Hearing Yeffy Fetai's slightly changed voice, the person standing on the chair slowly turned his head. With the smile, the pale teeth showed, you. Hey! Infinite blood poured into his brain instantly, and his hair seemed to explode one by one. Yeffy Fetai, who is particularly interested in big cases, has read countless reports of the case in the Scrap Iron City. She may know more about this case than the captain. But now, she looked at the face that was immersed in blood, and it came into view as if it was distorted and enlarged. She immediately thought of the indifferent boy covered in blood in the report. From his indifferent eyes, he thought of a certain TV report, the pair of people looking at the camera, full of anger and gloom. Look! Kara! There was a thunderbolt in the ear, and the blood was like being compressed by a high-pressure air pump, and it poured into the brain. You! She suddenly shouted loudly, and even took a step back. She wanted to raise the hand holding the gun, but it was extremely heavy. The murderer 3 years ago, the murderer who should have been shot long ago. Why did he suddenly appear here? In this kind of shock, when she was about to be shocked and almost numb, she saw the man who was like a nightmare in her somewhat blurred vision. The smile seemed to become distorted and weird, and she showed a cold smile to herself. With sharp teeth, it seems like a beast that chooses to devour people. Suddenly, an abnormal tremor occurred in Yafifei's mind, and then his eyes turned black and the world was spinning. She was frightened and fainted. What? Wei Wei, who was painting the walls, jumped out of his chair and tore off the small hat made of newspaper on his head. Why did this beautiful little girl faint? Are you looking so scary? He threw the brush into the red paint bucket, then pulled off the towel around his neck and wiped his hands, then walked towards the door. This girl fell hard just now. The sound of boom is very painful to hear. Besides, she actually had a gun. Wei Wei observed her in a circle, then searched her body a few times, and when he touched something hard, he reached in and found a document with dark black skin on the inside of her pocket. It has the words Scrap Iron City Environmental Protection. It was her. Wei Wei couldn't understand why this intern team member who he didn't see in the institute during the day suddenly appeared in the room he just rented. And he came up with a gun. This girl also looks a little strange. She is very beautiful, the clothes on her body and a few inconspicuous small jewelry also look very valuable, but they look dirty. Even, there is a taste like feeding ant pigs in the training camp. It's strange. However, Wei Wei had doubts in his heart, but he did not delay too much. He picked up the phone and dialed Captain Yu Yang. When the call was connected, he briefly explained the situation. On the other end of Captain Yu Yang's phone, there was the sound of crashing playing mahjong, mixed with a few vague curses. Whoever is a bastard. 8 tubes. Hey! Hey, you just scolded. Hey, yes, I'm just a who would rather win money. Feeling the good brand of the captain, Wei Wei knew that this was not a good time to disturb the leader, so he hurriedly talked about it in the shortest tone. Listening to Wei Wei's report, Captain Yu Yang first said and a few times, and then suddenly raised his voice. Hey! Wei Wei continued to report and described the girl's state. Captain Yu Yang suddenly became nervous. What the hell? Fuck. Lying trough. In the end, he said, I'll be there right away, and hurriedly hung up the phone. This leader can handle it, and really care about his subordinates. Wei Wei sighed and hung up the phone. After thinking about it for a while, he carried the intern of the same period to lie down on the sofa, and continued to paint his own walls. After a while, Wei Wei heard the sound of the sidecar slamming to a halt downstairs, and then the sound of climbing the stairs. Captain Yu Yang was sweating and appeared at the door of Wei Wei's house. On his elegant and handsome face, there was also a bright lipstick print that he didn't know where he brought it. First, he glanced nervously at Yafifei, who had fainted, and said anxiously. What's the matter? This. Facing this question, Wei Wei was also a little embarrassed. He pointed to the wall. I'm painting the wall. She suddenly broke in. Then, before I could ask her what she was doing, she passed out. Dizzy. Captain Yu Yang was obviously a little surprised by this answer, but after looking at the small house that was being painted, and Wei Wei, who had a little paint on his face, he gradually understood the answer, and at the same time, a new thought appeared in his heart. Confuse. Do you like such bright colors? Captain Yu Yang looked at the half-washed wall in embarrassment and asked with a strange expression. Yup. Wei Wei looked at the bright red paint, slightly proud, and said, how festive. It feels like home, doesn't it? Captain Yu Yang's expression suddenly became a little strange. This is a haunted house, and there has been a murder case that shook the entire Scrap Iron City. Because of its fierce reputation, this small apartment building, until now, is still a fierce building that no one dares to look directly at. The former client of the case returned to the Scrap Iron City and insisted on renting the apartment. Then, on such a rainy night, with dim lights, he painted the walls of the apartment little by little. Bright to dazzling blood red. Well, very reasonable. Not only did Captain Yu Yang feel reasonable, but Sister Lucky and Uncle Gun, who rushed over quickly, also felt reasonable. The two checked Ye Fei and determined that she was just fainted from fright, and that the armed belt around her waist was fastened very firmly. They felt a little relieved, and immediately arranged for someone to take her back to the place to rest, while preparing to wait for her. Wake up to do psychological counseling. At a young age, he can't leave any sequelae. Is this the intern team member you were talking about who was at the same time as me? Captain Yu Yang didn't leave in a hurry, so Wei Wei stopped painting the walls, politely poured a glass of water for the leader, and sat down. Oh, it's different. Captain Yu Yang scratched his neck irritably and said, you came from a serious training camp, and she. He didn't make it clear for a while, but Wei Wei could understand it. At a young age, he entered the mysterious Foundation branch for an internship, and he was specially equipped with a gun, but he was so timid. He was very interested and didn't inquire further. On the other hand, Captain Yu Yang, after shaking his head slightly, took out a pack of cigarettes and gave it to Wei Wei, and explained with a wry smile, it's all my own, and I can't hide it from you. The origin of this little girl is not simple. You have to pay attention in the future. Don't offend her. After all, she's the young lady of the dignified third-level consortium Yis. The daughter of the consortium. Wei Wei was a little surprised. There have long been countless large consortiums and alliances in the world. They are huge in size and compete for various forces and resources. Even some countries are already under their control. The appointment and removal of the president is just behind the scenes of the consortium. A word from the mastermind. However, there is no distinction between them. The consortium level that Captain Yu Yang mentioned is actually within the Foundation, based on the amount of sponsorship they give. Whoever gives more sponsorship to the Foundation will have a higher level. And the reason for the division. Wei Wei believes what the instructor once said, this is definitely not to give special care to some key nodes. And inciting the consortium to scramble for sponsorship. In short, the third-level consortium is already a very high level within the city defense line, so it can't help but pay attention. In particular, these consortiums don't just sponsor the Foundation's headquarters. It is also very friendly to the garrison teams in surrounding cities. Of course, Wei Wei was not surprised by this girl's identity, but since she has such a special identity, it's a secret anyway, why did the captain say it directly? It's better to explain it clearly, so as not to cause any trouble when you are young and arrogant. Captain Yu Yang sighed, remembered something again, and hurriedly reminded Wei Wei, however, don't miss out in front of her. Now in our institute, everyone pretends not to know her identity. Okay, I understand. Wei Wei smiled and nodded, being kind. But Captain Yu Yang listened, suddenly looked up at him, and said, do you think we are flattering her and playing games with a little girl like her? This. Wei Wei hesitated for a while, not knowing how to answer this. Is not it? As if seeing what Wei Wei was thinking, Captain Yu Yang shook his head helplessly, and said, little girl has dreams, but she has a good time, but if you have to come here, our research institute in this small place is also very embarrassed. Tsukura doesn't know her identity, she wants to change her position, and she wants to investigate major incidents, so I can expressly refuse, and if she makes other requests, I can also pretend to ignore it. But once it's broken, how can I refuse what she proposes in the future? Wei Wei couldn't help but stunned for a moment. Looking at the fox-like middle-aged and elderly handsome boy in front of him, he suddenly realized. That makes sense. Then he became slightly interested and said with a smile, but Captain, can such a young lady work? It's serious work. Captain Yu Yang said with admiration on his face, I go to the streets every day when it's o'clock. Do we still need to patrol the streets? No need, but I have to arrange something for her, it seems formal. She's a good girl. Captain Yu Yang praised, if you want to patrol the streets, just patrol the streets, and you won't get off work until you finish the patrol. After get off work, I take the subway for 2 stops, and then drive my sports car back to the villa to rest. I usually try to choose the cheapest lunch box when I eat, frugality and pretending to be poor, for fear that we will know her true identity. Wei Wei suddenly became curious, then how did you guess her identity? When she came to report on the first day, her father's secretary called me directly. Captain Yu Yang said, I specifically told us not to let her see that we are taking care of us, but we must take good care of it. Wei Wei was speechless. It's hard for you. No. Captain Yu Yang suddenly became interested, waved his hand and said, her father's sponsorship is generous, we all rely on her for subsidies. It turns out that one is willing to fight and one is willing to suffer. Wei Wei was amazed in his heart, and a sighing smile appeared on his face. When I came back, I knew that this little scrap iron city was very lively, but I didn't expect it to be more interesting than I imagined. Just as Wei Wei was thinking about it, Captain Yu Yang, who had revealed the identity of Miss Yat, suddenly turned around and looked at Wei Wei, smiling peacefully, but it seemed to have a different meaning, and said, however, this eldest lady usually wants to do something big, and has turned over the files in the scrap iron city, so, she should have recognized you just now, right? Wei Wei nodded lightly and said, it should be. Captain Yu Yang's pupil shrank, and suddenly said, so, are you really him? 3 years ago, the one who killed the family. He paused for a moment, and fixed his eyes on Wei Wei's face, the murderer. When Captain Yu Yang asked this sentence, his voice was extremely slow, and there was some uncertainty in his tone. It seems that even he never thought that it would be so fast, so he directly asked this question. Although he knew it was a matter of time, but this kind of inquiry directly pointing to the secret core often also represented the emergence of variables, and also represents the birth of danger. 3 years ago, a murder occurred in the small scrap iron city. A teenager from the ruins outside the city, carrying a rusty sickle, walked into room 302, building 7, block 15. No one knows what happened. Only the neighbor who called the police said tremblingly on the TV that there were shrill screams and demon-like laughter in that room. I heard the sound of tearing and blood splattering when the sharp blade cut into the body. Seeing that the fish in the fish tank in my living room suddenly crashed into the glass wall like crazy, the fish's brains were knocked out. Seeing terrified bats swarming and crashing like a whirlwind on the street. When the guard agency and the newspaper reporter arrived, they saw the boy sitting in a daze. A family of 6, 4 men and 2 women, were all killed in this room 302. This incident spread throughout the entire scrap iron city like the wind, and it also caused extreme panic for a time. People living in urban areas are even afraid to join these people who gather outside the city and make a living by picking up garbage and waste. Over the years since then, even the usual contempt and arrogance have been reduced a lot. It is precisely because the incident was too big that the case ended very quickly. Less than a month later, news came that the teenager involved had been identified as the murderer and shot to death. Many people think that this matter is over, but Captain Yu Yang, who came to the scrap iron city after that incident to take over the responsibility of handling supernatural events here, naturally knows some more secrets than ordinary people, or rather, unreasonable details. For example, the family in the news report is not a family, although they are also used to family as a unit. For example, in addition to the corpses of those people, some other things were also found at the scene. For example, there are traces of supernatural rituals all over the house. Even after the news that the person involved was tortured came later, he didn't feel suspicious. Before, or now, in order to quell some panic, it was not uncommon to use some intrinsically innocent people as scapegoats. However, even he did not expect that this matter would not end. 3 years later, the boy actually came back. He rented this room and painted it. Such a festive look. Facing Captain Yu Yang's direct inquiries, Wei Wei's face seemed calm. Neither the embarrassment of being told through the identity, nor the sudden sadness because someone brought up an old story. He didn't even seem to change his face, just looked at Captain Yu Yang calmly, and his tone even seemed a little relaxed. I thought you recognized me long ago. Captain Yu Yang leaned back quietly. Although he had known it for a long time, there was still some vigilance in his eyes. However, the captain may have misunderstood one thing. Wei Wei suddenly smiled again and said, "That person is me, but I'm not the murderer." Captain Yu Yang raised his eyebrows. Wei Wei continued with a smile and said, "Because none of the people I killed were human." In half of the bright red room, the atmosphere seemed to become slightly heavy. Wei Wei has a very gentle impression. When he speaks, he likes to smile first, sincere and serious. After he admitted his identity, he was also staring at Captain Yu Yang seriously, as if he wanted to see the captain's reaction. This delicate old coach seems to have been infected by Wei Wei's serious mood even more than this time, and even knows what his last sentence means, and his face exudes a melancholy mood. After a long time, it was only lightly shaking his head, he sighed. "Boy, I understand you." There was a touch of silence on his face, and he looked at Wei Wei sincerely. After the secret war that decided the Church of the 12 Gods to be banned, the world seems to have not changed much, and people are still ruled by people, and there are still classes and struggles, ambition and greed, and various vicious incidents, one after another. His voice was slightly heavy, and he seemed to be a little helpless. "However, I was one of the people who was infected very early, and you came from a formal training camp, so we all understand. The world has changed. With the emergence of demon power, there are many more cannibalistic monsters, disasters, and unsolvable diseases. There are also a lot of crazy people. Some of them worship demons and do anything to destroy the world at all costs, while others are simply greedy, delusional to use the power of demons as a tool to plunder some things from others, but they don't know that the rope is tied neck. These people, it's not a pity to die 10,000 times." Captain Yu Yang's voice became lower and lower, then he sighed softly and said, "It's just that, Xiao Wei, we always have to understand. In this world, everyone who wants to live normally needs a little luck. We don't know when there will be crazy demon believers around us, and they will do everything to complete the order. I don't know when there will be a group of degenerate monsters wandering in the wilderness attacking our dilapidated town. I don't even know if, just when we thought we were complacent, we heard the devils raving that night, and from then on, we became another person, hated the closest person before, and just wanted to put they chop to pieces. So." He stretched out his hand and patted the back of Wei Wei's hand, and said, "Try to think about everything as much as possible. It will all pass. Just like now, in the face of more and more madness, Xiao Wei, do you know what my biggest wish is?" Wei Wei was a little curious and glanced at the serious-looking captain. "Get rid of all the demons and protect the people in this city." "Do not." Captain Yu Yang's expression suddenly became slightly excited, and he said solemnly, "I just want to live in peace and quiet until I retire. Successfully smashed, steadfastly died, and steadfastly buried. And, no one will ever dig me out." Wei Wei suddenly didn't know how to interface. And Captain Yu Yang's serious expression suddenly collapsed, wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and sighed, "Tell me 1,000 words and 10,000, Xiao Wei, I don't know why someone like you who came from a formal training camp came back. But, peace is precious." Facing the captain's seemingly serious advice, Wei Wei smiled gently and nodded, "Okay." After sending Captain Yu Yang away, Wei Wei sat quietly on the sofa for a while and shook his head gently. Captain Yu Yang is a very down-to-earth person. He is an old fox, but he chose the most sincere words to communicate with him. Seeing that it was getting late, he was not painting the walls, but took his coat and went downstairs. During the day, there are still some stalls and vendors near this small building. But at night, the downstairs was clean, as if they were hiding from ghosts, and they dared not even look at the building. Wei Wei had no choice but to walk a few hundred meters, almost all the way to the edge of the 15th block, and then came to the lively night market. He bought 2 cages of steamed buns, a large portion of fried rice with eggs, 2 sausages, and a box of fried skewers. Added a big cone of ice cream and walked back. Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com. Although Captain Yu Yang said, "We can have dinner together in the institute. But now, since I just arrived, it's not quite right." Jing quietly ate half of his packed dinner. Wei Wei drank a glass of water and dragged out a box. He returned to Scrap Iron City and brought back not much luggage. There are only 2 large and 1 small, and 3 boxes. Among them, the first box contains a change of clothes and money. Now, this is the second box. The box is not big, only 50 centimeters long and 40 centimeters wide. The material is dark, and it is impossible to tell what composite material it is, only a strong and wear-resistant texture. The box mouth has an exquisite but extremely complicated combination lock, which is very mysterious. Wei Wei pressed his left thumb against the edge of the lock, then entered a long string of passwords, and the box opened with a click. Lifting the lid of the box, a set of complicated utensils and potions were displayed in front of Wei Wei. Wei Wei sighed lightly. Captain Yu Yang's idea is actually right. In this world, who doesn't want to live in peace and stability? He guessed that the purpose of his return was not simple, so he vaguely advised himself, "Don't provoke right and wrong. After all, there are too many illogical places in this world. No matter how well prepared you are and what you have learned in training camp, you may slam your head on the iron plate and become some monster on the dining table. A delicious dish." However, Wei Wei didn't believe that by being careful and hiding, he could gain stability. He only believed that the only thing in this world that could keep him alive was the ability to be crazier than a lunatic. The only thing that can guarantee that he will not be dug up by others after his death is to bury all the enemies and lunatics in the ground first.